don't see being knocked off their roller coaster ride just yet. The roller coaster they've been on. Charlotte's reign's obviously going to be continuing on right through to SummerSlam, and I think that's where Charlotte's going to cough up that championship. If it's not Sasha Banks who takes the title off of Charlotte, it's going to be her confidant in Dana Brooke. I would love to see Charlotte matching up against Dana Brooke, and that is bound to happen at some point or another with how Charlotte's been putting her over. A very unique way to bring in somebody, referring to her as her protege, despite how I feel about it, of course, calling her confidant. But I've been really impressed by how they've been handling the debut of Dana Brooke. I was even impressed watching some of her stuff on NXT, and it was really, a walk down memory lane for me going back and watching some of Dana Brooke's work on NXT. It was almost like you knew she was going to have that of a promising future in WWE, and possibly looking at her as being a future women's champion, which wouldn't surprise me none with how much promise she came in with, and of course how Charlotte picked up the ball after breaking off ties with her father and undoubtedly ran with it with Dana Brooke by her side. She seems impenetrable right now. Nobody seems to be able to stop her. I really appreciate the feud between Sasha Banks and Charlotte being shooken up with Dana Brooke being thrown into the mix, and possibly Becky Lynch. There was a lot of ways this one can go. I'm possibly looking at either a triple threat match with Dana Brooke probably in there, or a fatal four-way with Becky Lynch thrown in there, possibly seeing something like Charlotte versus Dana Brooke versus Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch. That would be awesome. And if not that, Charlotte versus Sasha Banks, and this will be where Charlotte finally coughs up that women's championship, which she has held, a combination of both the Divas and women's championships in SummerSlam. So there is a lot to be expected about this. Along with that, we have Randy Orton versus Brock Lesnar, which I'm really excited about. This has been a dream match talked about by wrestling fans for years, so I'm very thrilled that it's finally happening. It's finally becoming a realization. Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar, and it fits in perfectly with Brock Lesnar's victory at UFC 200. This is going to be awesome. SummerSlam's card is looking awesome, and I'm also anticipating the return of Triple H to tangle with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins versus Triple H in a battle of the pedigree. Who is the far more superior wrestler? We could be looking to find that out if Triple H returns to challenge Seth Rollins for SummerSlam for what could be for the championship if Dean Ambrose is no longer champion by the time we reach the end of the road to SummerSlam. But Dana Brooke, what do you think of her? What is your reaction? Get in on the conversation about this on social media. I would love to know what your reaction is about the debut of Dana Brooke again. I'll be writing a column about my reaction towards Dana Brooke's debut. I have been very impressed by it. I think that she is someone who has come in a very long time, the first person to do this in a really long time, leave an impression to give us something to talk about in the women's division. And if WWE wanted to give us something to talk about when it comes to women's wrestling, obviously Dana Brooke is the answer. Emphatically, she is the answer without a doubt. And I think we can get away with saying that she has a very promising future. If she has anything in her future, it's obviously at least one reign as WWE Women's Champion. This is a great way of shaking things up. And I think the women's division, because of the additions of people like Dana Brooke, have definitely come a long way. Because you go back through the years of the women's division, both the Divas and women's divisions through the years, whatever era of wrestling you're looking at. Alundra Blaze was one way of looking at it. Alundra Blaze and Asha Kong and Bertha Faye were one way of looking at it. But I mean, look at how much wrestling has evolved when it comes to women. We have Becky Lynch, we have Charlotte, we have Dana Brooke. Now throwing in there Sasha Banks, who had a lot of promise given her an endorsement, given her by her protege at the time, Dusty Rhodes, who she learned a lot from. I mean, the Divas Revolution has really exploded, and Stephanie knew what she was doing. This is one of the things that I rarely give Stephanie any credit for having done, endorsing the women's division. This is incredible what we've seen from the women's division ever since it was endorsed by Stephanie. Stephanie knew there was a lot of promise with this Divas Revolution, this women's revolution, and it obviously has changed the way people will look at women's wrestling for what will be a really long time to come, with the promising futures of people like Sasha Banks and Dana Brooke. Really appreciated the program between Dana Brooke and Sasha Banks, guys. That's one of the things to be highlighted here. I think this was a great way for Dana Brooke, to come in out of WWE. I think that the feud between Dana Brooke and Sasha Banks was amazing. The few matches that I saw on both Raw and SmackDown definitely fell nothing short of being unprecedented for me. I was a really big fan of these matches, and I hope we see more of these matches happening as time goes on and we get closer to SummerSlam on what will either be probably a fatal four-way or a triple threat, a toss-up between the two, or Sasha Banks versus Charlotte. Really appreciate what these two women have done, of course, promoting for something bigger, teasing for something bigger to happen, hopefully by SummerSlam. That's where I'm expecting this to reach its climax. This is a very important thing to remember here. Sasha Banks beating Dana Brooke in the several matches they have had by both pinfall and submission, termed by the alliance of Charlotte and Dana Brooke as fluke victories, but I think they are nothing but, definitely given to Sasha Banks because of Sasha Banks' perseverance and the fan reaction and response that Sasha Banks seems to get. Everybody wants to see Sasha Banks as that women's champion, have that one reign in there as women's champion. It seems like she's, going the route of a Daniel Bryan, where she's squandered out of every opportunity that she's given to be women's champion ever since at least WrestleMania. So I think there is a lot to go with Sasha Banks, and that's what it kind of resembles to me. Sasha Banks, a Daniel Bryan kind of character. And when you're talking about someone like Dana Brooke, is it just me, or does Dana Brooke remind you of somebody like a Beth Phoenix or a Joni Lauer in the way of China, or someone like an Asia from WCW? To me, she kind of resembles a Beth Phoenix before she resembles anybody over the years that we've seen in WWE. And I think that with that being said, with how Beth Phoenix, came in and dominated the women's division in WWE, the women's and divas divisions, and held, the championships a number of times before she left WWE and her contract expired. The thing is, with that being said, you can kind of predict the same kind of thing to happen for Dana Brooke, because she seems to be the replacement kind of thing, the kind of deal for Beth Phoenix, with how she's been, handling herself in the ring. And I got to give Dana Brooke credit. She can get in the ring and seem to hold her own against anybody that she's put in the ring against. You can match Dana Brooke up against anyone, and she definitely, has people coming away from her matches talking about her. She is turning heads, and obviously executives know the potential that's going with someone like a Dana Brooke. And definitely, I think that we cannot go on without endorsing the future of someone like Dana Brooke. You can easily say that someone like Sasha Banks has a championship reign in her future, but you cannot go on without saying the same thing about Dana Brooke. And if we were to go on and say, nothing else but Dana Brooke, and say, okay, Dana Brooke is just the confidant of Charlotte, who still has a long way to go and a lot to prove to wrestling fans, I think that would be just drawing a conclusion. We just have to give her time to really come into her own, and I have no doubt in my mind that Dana Brooke is going to be able to do that. Her style, her power, her agility, her devotion, her dedication to her role in WWE. You gave her a role as the protege of Charlotte, and I think there's a lot that goes with that, because you had to bring her in somehow. You just couldn't have her come in and dominate like you've had so many over the years. But even though there have been so many that have come in and dominated in the way of a Beth Phoenix or China, there have been a lot of people who came in as just managers, like Trish Stratus, and wanted to become some of the greatest of all time. I mean, nobody ever thought Trish would go on to become a 6 or 7-time women's champion and have an incredible 6-year run with the company. Nobody ever thought Kelly and Candice Michelle would come in and win respective championships for their respective careers and time in WWE. I think that, 6-7 years is a time for a woman to really break out in WWE, but I think that someone like Dana Brooke, we've come into an era where we're going to go beyond. We're going to see women get beyond that 7-year period, possibly even 8 through 10 years we're going to be seeing happen for women like Dana Brooke and Sasha Banks. These are women in an era that you kind of want to keep, and you want to do everything to keep them happy. And I don't see why WWE wouldn't go out of their way to make their women happy now and to keep them longer than 6 or 7 years. Because to me, in years of the last decade, especially through 2006 through 2009, we've seen a lot of women come into WWE and only have about a 7-year run with the company. 6 years if you're lucky, 7 years possibly if you can scratch one more year on the roster for a woman in WWE. But it seems like after you win the championship probably 2 or 3 times, you're done. And with how limited, a role for a woman to have in WWE or wrestling in general have been for years, they don't get enough in ring time, enough exposure, long enough matches, never enough time in the spotlight in the way of main events. There was only a significant amount of things for a woman to do. So obviously that has a lot to do with why we only see them probably 6 or 7 years if you're lucky, scratching one more year in there. But I think we've come into an era where, we've seen a championship be re-premiered in the Women's Championship. It made an incredible re-premiere with WrestleMania 32 and that incredible triple threat match between Charlotte, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks. I was really hoping that Sasha Banks was going to come away from that match victorious as champion. That didn't happen, and I think that a lot of people came away from WrestleMania 32 really disappointed that we didn't see the reign of Sasha Banks happen. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen, because you do have to create a history for that championship. That is something to take into consideration when talking about women's wrestling. There is no history for this new women's championship. The only possible way it could have a history is if you go back through the years for the original championship that was held by people like the Fabulous Moolah and people like Wendy Richter. There was only, a few people who had been able to hold that championship and have somewhat of a history for it, and that's the only case you can present for having history for this new championship as you go back through the years when people like Alundra Blaze in 1994, 1995 were winning that championship and making a reputation for it. So you kind of got to create that same kind of history. It's going to take a long time for it to be created, but it has to be created. And how you do that is by giving it to people like Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and this Dana Brooke character, who I am really extremely fond of. If you go back through the time she had in NXT, debuting on there, coming over from NXT to WWE, I don't think anyone has ever made a more impressive debut in the women's division. If I had to go back through the years, probably a debut of someone like a Gail Kim or a Beth Phoenix probably, closely resembles the debut of Dana Brooke. But everything about her promos, she is good on the microphone, she is good in the ring, she is very entertaining to watch and very unpredictable, extremely unpredictable, which is why I'm a really big fan of everything Dana Brooke has done thus far, and going to continue to be just as big of a fan of Dana Brooke in the future, because I think her future goes with a lot of promise, and we cannot go on without recognizing that, because if we don't recognize it, we're just kind of drawing a conclusion that I don't think necessarily needs to be drawn. We need to give Dana Brooke time to really come into her own. She's good on the microphone, she has great wrestling ability, she has great work ethic with a lot of people. Obviously the work ethic has been showing and shining through in this program with Sasha Banks, and we will see that continue and obviously carried over out of more programs and roles for Dana Brooke to have. I also appreciate the chemistry between Charlotte and Dana Brooke also, because you could put Dana Brooke in a tag team combination or an alliance, if you would, with anybody in the women's division in WWE right now, and probably it wouldn't be as effective as the combination we have seen recently formed between Charlotte and Dana Brooke. This could go a long way and goes with a lot of potential, and I am really excited for the future of that.